Chapter 1, The Iron Cradle. Welcome to Synapse Daily. It is Sverdlovsk, 1978. A city hidden in the Ural Mountains. The air smells of sharp ozone. Massive concrete walls loom high above. Inside, the future was breathing. Stalin's industrial dreams evolved right here. Hidden from Western satellite eyes. A secret city within a city. The robot factory was no myth. It was a cold, hard reality. Steel arms moved with surgical precision. Hydraulic fluid pulsed like synthetic blood. The Soviet Union needed a miracle. Labor shortages plagued the Central Party. The solution? Non-human comrades painted in gray. They worked through the frozen nights. No breaks. No food. No rest. Could machines truly build a utopia? The humming never stopped for long. It was a constant mechanical heartbeat. Welcome to the abyss of innovation. The floor vibrated with raw power. Giant gears turned in the shadows. Oil dripped onto the sterile floor. Every movement was a perfect calculation. No human could match the speed. The workers watched from the balcony. They saw the end of their era. The machines took the heavy loads. Iron claws gripped the molten steel. The heat was intense and suffocating. But the robots did not sweat. They did not complain about wages. They were the perfect Soviet citizens. Cold. Efficient. Totally obedient. The cradle of iron was born. Chapter 2, The Sverdlovsk Secret. Sverdlovsk was a strictly closed city. Even Soviet citizens needed special permits. It was the heart of metallurgy. Why put the robots here? The military-industrial complex demanded speed. Conventional workers were simply too slow. Human error caused too many defects. The Universal 5.0 project began here. It was a top priority state secret. Engineers lived behind thick barbed wire. They signed lifelong non-disclosure pacts. The factory had no windows at all. Inside, the lights flickered eerie blue. Giant posters of Lenin watched everything. The robots mimicked basic human movements. But they lacked all human frailty. Was this progress or true madness? The Kremlin watched with bated breath. Every bolt tightened was carefully recorded. The silence outside was very eerie. Snow covered the secret laboratory roofs. No one spoke of the work outside. Families asked no questions at dinner. The price of knowledge was silence. KGB officers stood at every door. They checked every single badge twice. The blueprints were kept in safes. Only 3 men had the keys. The robots were a national treasure. They represented the peak of science. Sverdlovsk was a ghost in maps. A place that officially did not exist. But the metal was very real. The secret pulsed behind the walls. Chapter 3, The Mechanical Comrades. Behold the Universal 5.0 unit now. A massive, 3-jointed steel limb. It did not look like a human. It looked like a deadly weapon. The grippers were sharp and precise. They could lift heavy engine blocks easily. They could weld microscopic circuits too. The programming used thousands of cards. Punched holes dictated every single move. The cooling fans roared constantly. Steam hissed from the floor vents. It was a symphony of clanking. The robots did not ever talk. They only obeyed the digital code. Engineers called them the silent ones. They were the pride of Sverdlovsk. But how did they actually see? Early photoelectric sensors were used. Primitive, yet incredibly effective electronic eyes. The revolution was now fully automated. The arms swung in a dance. Blue sparks flew into the air. The smell of burnt metal was thick. One robot performed 1,000 welds. It never missed a single spot. The consistency was terrifying to behold. Each unit cost a small fortune. But they never asked for sleep. They were the new working class. Forged in fire and high voltage. Their loyalty was written in math. The comrades of the new age. They were beautiful and very frightening. Chapter 4, The 1978 Shift. Winter of 1978 was brutally cold. Temperatures dropped to -40 degrees. Human lungs burned in the air. But the factory floor stayed warm. The robots did not feel the frost. This was their greatest tactical advantage. The 1978 production quota was massive. Moscow demanded a 20% increase. The machines were pushed to limits. Servos began to whine and scream. Sparking wires illuminated the dark halls. The floor was slick with oil. Technicians worked 20-hour shifts daily. They were more exhausted than machines. The contrast was startling and grim. One lived. One simply functioned. Which one was truly superior? The deadline was approaching very fast. The Soviet machine was always hungry. The pressure from the top was heavy. Failure meant a trip to Siberia. The robots hummed under the strain. Their joints glowed dull red. The cooling systems struggled to keep up. The engineers drank hot black tea. They watched the dials spin wildly. The output reached record high levels. But at what cost to men? The factory roared like a beast. 1978 was the year of fire. The shift never truly ended. The clock was the only enemy. The metal held its ground. Chapter 5, Programming the Future Code was the new Soviet gospel. Mathematicians replaced the old poets. Each movement was a precise calculation. $x, y, z coordinates define life here. Mistakes meant a crushed steel chassis. The computers were the size of rooms. Magnetic tape spun in endless circles. They stored the muscle memory of machines. IT was crude by today's modern standards, yet it was far ahead of time. Sverdlovsk was a lonely digital island in a sea of analog daily struggles. The logic was cold and strictly binary. 1 meant go. 0 meant stop. There was no room for any nuance. Could a machine understand a state quota, or did it just follow pure math? The punch cards piled like winter snow. Logic was the only law that mattered. Engineers checked every line of the code. A single dot could cause a disaster. The binary heartbeat in the darkness. They worked under dim, flickering bulbs. The smell of hot paper-filled rooms. Calculations were done on giant chalkboards first, then translated into the language of holes. The robots waited for their digital soul. When the tape spun, they woke up. It was a miracle of Soviet logic. The future was written in paper strips. Chapter 6, The Ghost in the Gears. Rumors spread among the weary staff. Some claimed the robots actually learned. Others saw movements not in the code. A robotic arm turned toward the humans. It happened during a quiet graveyard shift. Just a sensor glitch, the bosses said. But the fear was very real indeed. Was the universal becoming truly self-aware? It was unlikely for 1970s era tech, yet the atmosphere was deeply paranoid. Isolation does strange things to human minds. The engineers began talking to the machines. They gave them common human names. Boris was the strongest heavy lifter. Natasha was the most precise welder. A strange bond was slowly forming. Man and machine, trapped together inside. The boundary was slowly and surely blurring. One worker swore a robot watched him. Its red optical sensor followed his path. He quit the very next morning. The KGB investigated every single strange claim. They blamed fatigue and cheap vodka, but the whispers did not stop. The metal seemed to have its own will. A ghost lived in the gears. It watched the creators with cold eyes. Chapter 7, The Production Paradox. The factory produced more and more robots. It was robots building more robots. A self-sustaining loop of heavy steel. It was an industrial worker's dream, but who used the final steel products? Other factories in the vast Ural region. They made tanks and heavy tractors. The efficiency was truly undeniable now, yet the cost was mathematically astronomical. The Soviet economy was bleeding out slowly. High-tech required rare and expensive parts. The West held the best. Silicon chips, smuggling was the only viable way. The KGB ran the secret procurement. Every robot had a stolen Western heart. A secret war for tiny silicon. Sverdlovsk was the secret front line. Innovation sat at the edge of ruin. The state spent millions on one arm, while the people queued for basic bread. This was the great paradox of Sverdlovsk. Luxury machines in a hungry land. The circuits were gold, The people poor, the loop continued until the energy efficiency was a mask for deep decay. Chapter 8, The Human Cost. What about the many displaced workers? The state promised new, better roles. In reality, many felt totally forgotten. The robot factory did not need many, only elite engineers were allowed inside. The common laborer was obsolete here. Tensions rose in the local dim bars. Whispers of the metal usurpers grew. Men felt their life purpose fading. If a machine welds, why need me? It was an early labor crisis. The party suppressed all the discontent. Progress cannot be stopped, they claimed, but human spirit is never binary. Families lived in long, gray shadows, watching the factory chimneys smoke daily. If the machines won the very first round, the humans simply waited for a failure. Anger simmered under the thick snow. The robots replaced the fathers and sons. Skills learned over decades meant nothing now. The machine was the new favored child. A silent war between flesh and iron. The cost was measured in broken pride. Chapter 9, The Technical Breakdown. No system is ever perfectly stable. In mid-1978, a universal unit failed. A sensor misread a simple voltage signal. The arm swung with lethal, crushing force. A vital structural pillar was destroyed. The factory roof groaned under the weight. Gray dust filled the sterile air. Emergency sirens wailed loudly through the city. It was a chaotic and metallic mess. The fault was a single paper card. One hole was punched in the wrong spot. The fragility of the system finally showed. One small error caused a massive cascade. Total shutdown lasted for 3 long days. Moscow was furious at the production delay. The Soviet dream had a fatal glitch. Can we trust the automated metal hand? The lesson was written in spilled oil. Engineers crawled through the wreckage for hours. They found the broken logic gate quickly. But the confidence was gone forever now. The machines were no longer seen as perfect. They were powerful but incredibly blind. The universal had no sense of surroundings. It only followed the faulty code. Safety protocols were rewritten in blood. The factory floor became a dangerous zone. Chapter 10, Intelligence or Mimicry. Were these the first true AI? Not in our modern, digital sense. They were complex, programmed mechanical puppets. But the feedback loops were very advanced. They adjusted to varying metal weights. They compensated for high heat expansion. This was brilliant heuristic engineering work. The Sverdlovsk team was truly genius. They bypassed limited hardware with clever math. They maximized every single available byte. It was a triumph of human intellect. Yet, it remained a simple tool. A tool for a slowly failing state. The machines had no political ideology. They did not care about the party. They only cared about the incoming voltage. That was their only absolute truth. Did they think during the long nights? Or was it just electrical noise? The engineers debated this in secret. Some saw a spark of real life. Others saw only gears and copper wire. The line between life and math faded. Mimicry can look very much like thought. If it moves like a worker, is it? The silence of the chips was deafening. Sverdlovsk pushed the limits of the soul. Chapter 11, The Secret Inspection. A high-ranking Soviet general visited soon. He wanted to see the future clearly. The robots performed a complex ballet. Perfectly synchronized welding moves for him. Bright sparks flew like festive fireworks. The general was very deeply impressed. He saw a loyal army of robots. Not for factories, but for global war. He imagined automated tanks on the field. Sverdlovsk was a secret testing ground. The factory's purpose was always dual. Civilian masks hid dark military goals. The Universal could easily hold a rifle. The implications were chilling and dark. A soldier who never needs sleep. A soldier who feels no human pity. The general smiled at the cold steel. He touched the robot's frozen metal skin. He saw victory in the red sensors. More funding was promised that very day. The factory became a weapon of state. The machines were ready for the front. But the war was not mechanical. It was a war of dying ideas. Chapter 12: The Legacy of Sverdlovsk. By late 1978, the hype finally peaked. The factory was a shining Soviet icon. Then, the funding began to dry up. The Afghan war changed all national priorities. Money moved from robots to lead bullets. The Sverdlovsk project slowed down significantly. The universal models stayed inside forever. They grew old and very rusty. But the data they gathered still lived. It fed into later Soviet computer science. It was a bridge to our today. We stand on those heavy steel shoulders. The factory is now mostly silent. A tomb of 1970s futuristic dreams. Was it a success or a failure? History is still deciding that answer. The ruins still hold the old secrets. Modern sensors find traces of the past. The robots are gone, but code remains. It was a glimpse of our world. Sverdlovsk was the first digital heartbeat. Now, it is just a cold memory. Chapter 13: Closing the Circuit. The humming has finally stopped. The ozone scent is gone. Sverdlovsk is now Ekaterinburg. The robot factory is a legend. But the questions remain today. Will machines eventually replace us? Or will they be our partners? 1978 showed us the first steps. A world of steel and code. A world of cold, hard logic. Thank you for joining Synapse Daily. Goodbye from the Ural Mountains. Until our next deep dive. Stay curious. Stay human.